Hi, everyone, and welcome to this live TOEFL prep session. I will be going through the speaking prompts like type 1 and type 2, a few examples, and the overall strategies that I recommend to students when they're preparing for this section. We're looking at these familiar questions, which can be based on a personal experience, giving your opinion, giving some advice, and maybe choosing between a few options about which one you would prefer and why. So please, in the comments, let me know where you are from, what your target scores are for your upcoming exam, and when you plan to take the exam. So I will keep an eye on my cell phone with the chat section. And in a minute here, I'm going to be showing you some slides. I'll be going through some of the what you need to keep in mind for how you are being evaluated for your the speaking section, what the examiners are expecting from you, and how they are going to be assessing and evaluating that speaking section. And I'll give you just a few examples of the reports. For example, my own, when I took the test earlier this year and was able to get a 30 on speaking. So these strategies, these techniques, I have been using them with my own students for over a year and a half now of teaching online, and I've also been teaching offline for several students as well. But these strategies have been working for students from all around the world. I've had students from parts of Europe, the Americas, Russia, Asia. So I've been helping people from many different language backgrounds as they are working to improve their English. So hello, Anush, I see that you're from Kazakhstan. So I can say hi to you there. So I think this is probably later in the evening for you. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to let us know a little bit about your specific needs for the speaking section. What do you struggle with, and what are your target scores that you are looking for the speaking section? So we've got a few, I see several people joining in now. Perhaps you've been getting a few of the notifications. And so I'm going to start switching over to my screen, so you can see for that. Okay. I'm just going to double check that the audio is working correctly on here. Probably refresh the screen, I guess. I would also recommend to make sure that you're getting like a good quality image and sound on the YouTube settings. You can click on the settings, and on the video quality, you can raise this to HD. It might default to a lower quality setting to just make sure that you're getting the best video and audio. Okay, there. Yeah, I can see that the video and the audio is working there. Okay, great. So I'm going to get into the slides now and start going into these strategies, to what I share with a lot of students for those strategies. And then we'll go through a couple of these sample questions and make sure to get to your own questions for tips, advice. So feel free to keep sending messages in the chat area. I will be looking at that, and I will get to your questions throughout. So I'm going to do the screen share now. And if you could let me know that you can see my screen, that would be good. So let me know. I will also check over here to see that you can see my screen. There's a little delay on here, but if you can leave a message like, yes, you can see my screen, that would be helpful. Yes, okay, great. Thank you, Raj, that you can say that you can see my screen. And I will change over to next slide here. Okay, so today we are here looking at the speaking section. We're looking at these type 1, type 2 prompts. And before we get specifically into looking at those questions themselves, I'd like you to get a little bit more into the strategy, the mindset that you need to know for this. Okay, so I'm going to try zooming in a little bit more here at this 100%. Make sure you can see the screen clearly. Okay. And I will hide that. Okay, and so make sure that you can still see this. Okay, I'm going to be switching now to the next slide. So if you're here today, it's perhaps because there's a few struggles that you might have with your speaking. For example, maybe you have taken the exam a few times and you keep getting the same scores of maybe like a 23, 22, a 24. And you can't seem to break this barrier of maybe like getting a 26 and above, and like what's holding you back. You seem to have, you've worked on your grammar, you've worked on your the structure, you've worked on template phrases, but for some reason you're not getting past this kind of 23, 24. Perhaps you've purchased many prep books and you know all the strategies, you've worked with all the experts and the gurus for TOEFL prep strategies, but when you start actually speaking, you get very nervous, you panic, and you kind of lose focus, and that affects the quality of your speaking and your confidence. Maybe you already live in the United States, but for some reason maybe you're surrounded by friends who are from your native country, and so you spend more time speaking to them in your native language than actually interacting with English-speaking native speakers and working on your listening skills and your speaking skills and improving your intonation. So maybe that exposure to your native language is perhaps holding you back. Maybe you're already living in the States and you're trying to pursue maybe like to get a pharmacy license or a nursing license, or you want to transfer from, I don't know, a community college to a four-year college, and you need to kind of improve your speaking skills. So, or maybe perhaps you get really self-conscious when speaking. You know that you make mistakes with your pronunciation, but and you get nervous about that, and maybe you don't know how to fix those mistakes. Or native speakers understand you, but they never correct you. So those could be different characteristics about some things that could be affecting you. Is there one of those situations that you can identify with right now? If I haven't kind of mentioned this, let me know in the comments, in the chat area, what are some of your own personal struggles for getting better at your speaking and feeling more comfortable. Now, moving on from here, a few common questions that I receive from students. For example, how can I brainstorm in just 15 seconds? I only have 15 seconds. This is really, like, I can't come up with any ideas. What do? I just get stuck. I panic. I get nervous. I'm not sure how to improvise. Should I use a template? Should I use an outline for the for developing my answers? If I do use a template, what phrases should I put in there? How would I organize how I speak? What happens if I make a mistake while I'm speaking? Should I correct myself? Should I stop? Should I just go silent? What happens if I get cut off at the end of the 45 seconds? Or if it's the integrated speaking, then perhaps if I get cut off at 60 seconds. How can I learn to speak faster? So I realize that I speak kind of slowly. Um, I run out of time to develop my answer. Okay, here's a comment from Raj. In some personal topics, I run out of ideas. Can I make up any false stories? And I would say yes. You can get inspired by your friends' anecdotes, things you've seen in movies or TV, or things you've read about in a story. Uh, you can embellish your answers by getting inspired by other people's stories and background. Other question here, like, well, what is more important when I'm developing my speaking? Is it how I structure my thoughts? Is it the content of my message? Is it my pronunciation? Is it my vocabulary? Is it my grammar? What should I focus on first? So there's like a lack of clarity, or there's a lack of like knowing where to focus and what is important, and realizing that I think a lot of those things are all kind of together. They all come together, but you do need to maybe get a plan of what you focus on first, and little by little. We'll go through that strategy in a few slides from now. There's another comment here from Lilia from Ukraine. And just, yeah, wanting to improve speaking. Yeah, I think these strategies will also help you improve your speaking overall. But keep these questions, comments, and thank you for being here. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your input on this. Another question here, like, do I have to have 2 reasons? What if I can only think of 1? Like, so that I think that you could relate to that, maybe, Raj, about coming up with ideas or running out of ideas. So ETS does not specifically say you have to have 2 reasons, but most of the templates that you'll find in the test prep books and YouTube videos, they'll usually say you need 2 reasons. And and quite often when I see students get stressed out about having 2 reasons, 2 reasons is to kind of give you a backup thing to say if you kind of just run out of, I mean, not run out of time, but if you kind of run out of ideas and you need to keep developing them. 2 ideas, 2 supporting reasons is so you can kind of choose which one is better, or add maybe another perspective to your question. Personally, I would much prefer to hear a student give a very well-developed, show the logic, show how the ideas relate to each other, how they relate to the topic question and the prompt, and really go into detail, get very specific with that 1 reason and the logic behind it, then to just very superficially develop 2 reasons, and without really going into the details, just because they feel pressured into having to give 2 reasons arbitrarily. So I would much prefer to see 1 reason that was very well developed and had a lot of detail to explain this idea. Okay, so we need to get into some things of self-diagnosis. Like, why are you here? Why are you here today? And what is holding you back? So maybe you need to focus on what are your most frequent mistakes when speaking. Do you get feedback from native speakers? Do you notice things when you're speaking to people, either on Skype or in a conversation? Do you ever record yourself? So I would highly encourage you to record yourself speaking. There are free apps that you can find on the internet and even on your cell phone or computer. There's probably an app or a program that can allow you to record yourself. And I know some people don't like listening to themselves on a recording, but this is how the test is administered. You are being recorded by a computer. This is not the IELTS where you are speaking with a human and having a conversation. The TOEFL speaking section is with a microphone, like a headset microphone, and you need to get comfortable with being recorded, listening to how you sound on a recording, and recognizing what are those mistakes. Is it maybe related to a certain word? Maybe you have some problems with vocabulary, that you repeat yourself. Maybe you repeat yourself because you get nervous. Maybe there are certain sounds that are difficult for you to pronounce. So, or do you feel like you're at a lower level with your English and you're still thinking and brainstorming in your native language and then translating? That could slow you down, that could hold you back, that could create some strange sounding, awkward sounding phrases because you might be just copying the same structure and syntax of your native language and imposing that on English. Do you need to review basic English grammar and structures? Do you have hesitations on auxiliary verbs like be, have, do? How do you feel about the 12 tenses? How do you feel about active voice, passive voice? How are you at structures like conditional statements, if um, and would or will or would have? So do you have any hesitations on those things, or subject-verb agreement or prepositions? Figure out what is holding you back. Figure out what those details about grammar are that you need to review, because only you really know what those are, and you need to be responsible for researching that and fixing it, and getting better at that. You don't want to go into the test kind of like knowing what your mistakes are and just hoping for the best. You want to kind of pinpoint these things that are holding you back and systematically start fixing them one by one. And when you do that, when you start fixing the things that are holding you back, either it's your grammar mistakes, it's your structure mistakes, it's the pronunciation, it's the intonation. When you start getting those little improvements and you can specifically identify that you improve them, you will get more confident. And as you get more confident, you will also reduce more mistakes. So it is a positive feedback loop where the more things you fix and you fix them and you practice them, the more confident you will get that what you're saying and the vocabulary words that you're using and your grammar is correct. That will feed back into your confidence, and the more confident you get, the better you speak. The better you speak, the more confident you get. So we want to get this feedback loop where you feel comfortable, you feel relaxed, and you feel confident with your speaking. And that is a key for improving your speaking section. You want to remove the stress, you want to remove the hesitations, you want to remove the doubts, you want to remove the anxiety. So the TOEFL, it is a language exam, and it is also like a how well do you speak, so you can do something with the results of that exam, so you can get into a university, so that you can get a license, you can immigrate. I don't know, there's lots of reasons why people take the test, but it is also a like, how well do you speak this language? And you can't just really cram that into a few hours or just a few days before your test. You need to have kind of you need to take some time to gradually improve how you speak and how confident you feel when you're speaking. So basically, let me know in the comments here, what do you feel is your number one thing that is currently holding you back with your speaking? Is it pronunciation? Is it grammar? Is it the amount of vocabulary words that you know? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so next on here. What is it that the examiners are listening for? So I hope that you have already seen this document. If not, I will also provide the link to this PDF. This is from ETS. You can see this in the official guide to TOEFL. You'll see it reproduced in many of the test prep books. And this is the scoring guide of how you are evaluated for your independent speaking. That's questions 1 and 2. And the integrated speaking, which is questions 3, 4, 5, and 6. So today, we're looking a little bit more at the independent ones. Those are the questions 1 and 2, or what people call like the familiar, personal experience kind of topics. But in both cases, for the independent and integrated, there's 3 things that you need to be aware of. It's your topic development, it's your language use, and your delivery. So to get the highest score, which is a score of 4, the first thing to keep in mind for the topic development is, are you able to speak for like the length of time for like the 45 seconds for that answer? Is what you are saying, is it clear? Is it coherent? Is it developed? Have you demonstrated how your ideas kind of link to each other? Are your ideas actually related to the speaking topic? Are you providing like enough detail, specific detail for those ideas? Are you getting lost in abstract concepts, or are your ideas easy to follow and simple? So you want to have a logical flow of ideas when you're preparing your topic development. Also, the language use, are you using grammar effectively? Are you using appropriate vocabulary words? Do you sound automatic when you're using those structures, or do you hesitate? Do you have hesitations on like complex conjugations, like verb tenses, or are you hesitating on complex structures like a conditional statement? So if you have any little hesitations, you need to develop more of this automatic feeling for speaking correctly. This doesn't just mean that you memorize a lot of grammar rules and then try to recite them from memory and use them. It means you need to get a deep feeling of what sounds right, maybe more or less understand why it sounds right, but you need to be able to use these structures automatically without thinking about them. And that comes from frequent speaking practice and frequent feedback on how to improve those structures. Now, notice that in the language use, it says some minor errors are noticeable but do not obscure the meaning. So they don't expect you to have a perfect answer. It's okay if you have some mistakes, but you need to have an attitude that if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You keep going. You minimize your mistakes and make sure that they don't obscure what you're trying to say. Okay. Lastly, it's your delivery. This is your intonation. Do you sound natural? Do you sound like a native speaker? Is your pronunciation clear? Are you articulating sounds? Are you making the like vowel sounds and consonant sounds clearly? Are you using like thought groups, and are you pausing and slowing down and using content and function words correctly so that the listener can identify what your message is? So those things are usually, the delivery aspect is usually what separates an answer from like a 23, 24 to getting like a 26 and above to like the 30. So it's not enough just to have a clearly identified kind of structure to your answer and then making sure you're using your grammar correctly. You also need to take into account how do you actually sound? Like, do you are you sound kind of fluent? Do you sound comfortable? Do you sound confident with your speaking? Do you sound like a native speaker? So those are aspects of your delivery on there. Okay. There's a comment here from Lilia about thinking in your native language and then translating to English. Yeah, I know that at certain levels that is kind of necessary, that is common. And I actually kind of get to that in a second to say that isn't necessarily a bad thing during the practice preparation stages so that you can develop like the topic development stage, how to structure ideas, how to brainstorm. So we'll get to that in a second here. Okay, so I want to show you in terms of, this is from the official guide. This is an extract from there about what the examiners are looking for. So I just showed you these scoring rubrics, and they mentioned, yeah, become very familiar with what they are looking for and understanding how you're being evaluated. So on here, again, it's delivery, language use, topic development, and they say here it's holistic scoring. So that means everything is taken together. It's not kind of bits and pieces of one level and bits and pieces of another. It's, do you seem to fit this criteria at one level? And you get an overall score at that level. You don't get mixed and matched. Like a 3.5. You either get a 3 or a 4. That's it. You don't get halfway in between. So in terms of the delivery, again, how clear is your speech? Good responses are those in which the speech is fluid and clear with good pronunciation, natural pacing, and natural sounding intonation patterns. Language use, how effectively do you use grammar and vocabulary to convey your ideas? Raters will be listening for how well you can control both basic and more complex language structures and use appropriate vocabulary. So not just simple sentences, you also need to add maybe compound sentences, complex sentences, and to be able to use those structures, you need some transition words like conjunctions and prepositional phrases. I don't want to go all the way into the specifics of those grammar points. You can find other explanations online, but just be aware that you do need to add some variety to your sentence structures when you're speaking. In terms of the topic development, how fully do you answer the question and how coherently do you present your ideas? Is it difficult to understand what you're trying to say in terms of your ideas? Good responses generally use all or most of the time allotted. So, and the relationship between your ideas and the progression from one idea to the next is clear and easy to follow. And once again, the raters do not expect you to be perfect, but a high scoring response can still contain a few mistakes or a few minor lapses in vocabulary or grammar without obscuring the meaning. So those are those 3 things you need to be aware of for your speaking. And so let's take a look at the score report that I received. So this is when I took the test in February, and I got a 30 out of 30 on speaking, a 30 out of 30 on writing. At the time, I was not as well developed in my reading and listening strategies. I've been focusing more and more on that for myself and also for my students. But most of my work with students has been with the speaking and writing feedback. So I'm very proud of those 2 scores. And this is what the report says on that speaking about familiar topics, which is this kind of type 1, type 2 question that we're looking at. And a big word that comes up frequently here is effectively. So it says, your responses indicate an ability to communicate your personal experiences and opinions effectively in English. Overall, your speech is clear and fluent. Your use of vocabulary and grammar is effective with only minor errors. Your ideas are generally well developed and expressed coherently. So in the campus situation, once again, your responses indicate an ability to speak effectively in English about reading material and conversations typically encountered by university students. Overall, your responses are clear and coherent with only occasional errors of pronunciation, grammar, or vocabulary. Lastly, for speaking about academic course content, your responses demonstrate an ability to communicate effectively in English about academic topics typical of first-year university studies. Your speech is mostly clear and fluent. You are able to use appropriate vocabulary and grammar to explain concepts and ideas from reading or lecture material. You're able to talk about key information and relevant details with only minor inaccuracies. So this level, good, that is the highest level you can get on the speaking section. And these are the comments, these are the things you are looking for to get the highest answers. You need to be able to be effective with how you speak. You need to be coherent. You need to have clear and fluent speech. Your pronunciation needs to be natural, and you need to have an effective use of grammar and vocabulary. You need to be developing your ideas with like a lot of detail. They need to be well structured, well developed, so that you can get these high scores. Okay, so much to fix, but where to start? So we have topic development, we have language use, we have delivery. Where do I start? Okay, a lot of students come to me and they immediately want to start working on their delivery or the grammar. And I think it's better to kind of backtrack and start with topic development. So one of my fellow TOEFL prep colleagues and mentors, Jamie Miller of the English Success Academy, she recommends to her students to first kind of write down their ideas for their topic development and take a look at like record themselves and then take some kind of a dictation of what they were able to say in 45 seconds, and also maybe take the time without the timer, without the pressure for the time pressure, to just kind of think about and brainstorm these ideas and then write them down without that time pressure, and then take a look at how to improve the structure and the logic and the development of the answers, eliminate some of the grammar and vocabulary mistakes, and then start working on the delivery and the fluency. So I would also agree with that approach and say that you want to eliminate your language obstacles. You want to get your ideas structured. It's okay in this introductory stage that you are brainstorming in your native language, because you want to get an idea of how would you naturally answer that question if this was asked in a conversation with a friend in your native language. What would you say about that, without sounding kind of fake or suddenly trying to create this academic false sounding voice? Be yourself, be relaxed. Try to approach these questions as if you were in a conversation, and just think about this, like, what would you actually say? It doesn't matter if you don't have an opinion on a particular topic. It's okay, but you shouldn't agonize about that. You shouldn't overthink it. You shouldn't let yourself get stuck. If there is no perfect answer, there is no right or wrong choice between do you agree or disagree, or do you prefer this or that, or what is your favorite this. There's no real right or wrong answer. So just say something like maybe the first thing that comes to your mind and try to be simple about it. Don't try to use something that's too complicated or too complex that you can't really develop in 45 seconds. Try to keep it simple, try to keep it clear, easy to follow, demonstrate your logic, demonstrate your reasons for why you say certain things, for your opinions. And keep your sentences short and straight to the point at first. Later, as you write those ideas down, simply, you can add more structure into your ideas. But keep your ideas short, keep them understandable, keep them clear, and then you can work on the complexity of your sentences and the variety. But first, you need to have like specific, understandable ideas that are easy to understand. And then you can work on how well you use grammar and vocabulary to develop those ideas. Okay. Next, once you are getting better and better at those topic development, you can notice that these are kind of like an independent writing essay. So write them down and then submit your short little answers to websites like italki or Lang8. Or if you're studying with language partners or study partners for the exam, create a Google Doc where you can copy and paste your little answers, share them with your study partners, and give each other some feedback to see what are some of your common mistakes. Are your mistakes related to grammar? Are your mistakes related to vocabulary? Are your sentences understandable? Are you able to create some kind of a progression that makes sense with your answer? Or are you kind of adding fluff and just sentences that don't really develop your answer, that are just there like a template phrase? So try to get your ideas in place. Try to brainstorm calmly and take your time. Write these answers down. Get familiar with what is a good answer. Take a look at model answers that have gotten a score of the highest scores and see what is it that those students or test prep coaches, what is it that they do with their topic development and structure and explaining their ideas? What is it that they do that you're not doing? And how can you learn from those model answers? Next, when you receive feedback, can you see my latest slide? I'm getting an impression that it might just still be on the first slide. So let me make sure. Let me leave a comment in the comment section to say what slide do you see on the screen. So I may need to update this briefly, because it looks like the slide might be stuck here. Let me go back. And okay, it does look like it's there. Let me try it one more time for this. It looks like that slide was not sharing correctly. I'm sorry about that. Let me double check on the slide one more time. I think this time I will just share my screen and not necessarily be there. Okay, so let me go back here. So sorry about that. Let me just double check that I will share that screen now. Yeah, that's the difficulty sometimes with sharing the screen and sharing the from a program. It was not updating. So I said before, just briefly going back through these slides. Sorry. So yeah, sorry about that. It was stuck on the first slide. So I had these slides ready. I'll go back through them. So basically, I was mentioning some common struggles why you might be here today, which were taking the exam, getting stuck at 23, having purchased several of the books, knowing the strategies, but getting nervous when speaking. Maybe you already live in the States, but you're still speaking with people from your native country. Maybe you're very nervous about your mistakes in pronunciation and you don't know how to fix these things, or people don't give you feedback. So let me move on next. Make sure that you can see these. I think it has moved. Just 1 second to see if it is switching slides. Okay, yes, okay. Okay, well, thank you for your patience there. So yeah, these were some of the frequently asked questions that I was discussing before about brainstorming techniques, using templates, what happens if you make mistakes, if you get cut off, how can you improve your speaking speed, what's important, is it your structure, your content, your pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, and what to do. Do you need 2 reasons? Do you have to have 2 reasons? So those were a few of those comments or those frequently asked questions that I received from students. The self-diagnosis, those were questions for you to look at and consider when you're working on your speaking. What are your most frequent mistakes? Do people ask you to repeat certain words? So do you have problems with pronouncing certain words? Are there certain sounds that are difficult? And this was this comment I think that Lilia had mentioned about thinking first in a native language and then translating. And then grammar and developing confidence, and what is the number one thing that is kind of holding you back. Then we had these 2 rubrics. So those were the documents that I was referring to, saying that these are, you should see them in the official guide, and you should be able to find them in many of the test prep resources. And those were the 3 things about the topic development, the language use, and delivery. I was reading directly from some of those comments. Next, I was taking this extract directly from the official guide to TOEFL, which provides those explanations about the delivery, about the language use, about the topic development, about what you need to be aware of, and that they're not looking for perfect scores. That this is about how clear your speech is, if your speech is fluid and clear, you have good pronunciation, natural pacing, and natural sounding intonation patterns, and how effectively you're using grammar and vocabulary, and if you can control basic and complex language structures and using appropriate vocabulary. And then the topic development, how fully you answer the question, how coherently you present your ideas, and that you use all the time allotted, and you show the relationship between your ideas and the progression from one idea to the next. And that is clear and easy to follow. And they don't expect you to be perfect. There can be a few mistakes. And as long as you kind of keep going and minimize those mistakes. And then I showed you my score report, which was a 117 out of 120 when I took the test earlier this year in February. I plan to take the test soon, perhaps in November. And I got a 30 out of 30 on the speaking and a 30 out of 30 on the writing. And I was mentioning reading directly from the score report that I received at the good level on each one of those, saying that your responses indicated an ability to communicate your personal experiences and opinions effectively in English. Overall, your speech is clear and fluent. Your use of vocabulary and grammar is effective with only minor errors. Your ideas are generally well developed and expressed coherently. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're aiming for when we want to work on the speaking section. We want to be effective with our English. We want to have a good use of grammar. We want to be using appropriate vocabulary words. We want our speech to be clearer. We want it to be articulated. We want to have understandable intonation patterns. Those are the things that we need to work on to get these higher scores for the speaking. And that's why we moved on to here of what to fix and where to start. So this picture is somebody looking at a leaky boat. That's usually how I kind of compare things with students, to say you put your finger in one hole for the water, and then it comes into another place, and then you fix that and that and that. And you just get this impression that you're constantly fixing little mistakes. But that is what allows you to speak at a high level of the language. When I speak in a foreign language, people usually don't give me credit for like the 80 to 90% about how well I speak that language. They notice still these tiny mistakes about grammar or pronunciation, or maybe the right vocabulary word. that those are the tiny things that they notice. And those are the tiny things I need to work on to tweak and fine tune in order to sound fluent or to sound confident or to sound comfortable with speaking. As if you want to get these high speaking scores, you do need to identify what your main mistakes are. And as I mentioned here, moving on to starting with the topic development, that is one of the main things that I mentioned with Jamie Miller of the English Success Academy, that she would kind of focus first with her students on topic development and getting people to structure those ideas, and then work moving on to language use and grammar and vocabulary. And then finally, when those are fixed and they feel comfortable and natural, then you can kind of move on to the delivery. Okay, so we were looking at, it's okay to brainstorm your ideas in your native language without the time pressure. Just let those ideas kind of come to the surface, think about them, reflect on them, write them down, start putting vocabulary into groups or related topics, and then compare your answers with other learners, other test takers, and see what does everybody kind of contribute to that same question. So brainstorm kind of collectively as a group as well, not just on your own, and take a look at model answers, see what works. Take a look at answers that didn't score well, see why didn't they work, understand what they could have done to improve. So have an analytical approach when you're looking at listening and reading other people's answers to see why this worked, why it was effective, why it wasn't effective, how it could be improved. So have a problem-solving approach to looking at your answers and realizing they can always be improved. There's no perfect answer, but you can always make it a little bit better the next time. And you want to just keep practicing so that you get more and more comfortable with your answers. You're never going to get it perfect, but you can have an effective strategy in place so that you don't get overwhelmed, or you don't get nervous, or you don't get kind of stuck when speaking, that you can think quickly, react quickly, and keep going. Okay, so always make sure that your ideas are simple, clear, easy to follow, short, straight to the point. Those are the best approaches to have for your ideas and to start developing your response. Then, as I mentioned, writing these ideas down, constantly improving and creating like an updated, improved version with both your writing answer and also recording yourself. Record it until it gets a little better, and then listen to those recordings to see what can still be improved upon. Listen to your pronunciation, your intonation. Chunking is how you put groups of words together. Where are you hesitating? Try to determine what those hesitations are. Is it hesitations about content? Is it hesitations about grammar? Are you pausing in the right places? So those are things that you can start moving on when you start reading your answers out loud, once they have been corrected, once you've gotten feedback from teachers, tutors, study partners, etc. And then now here the language use. So go find basic grammar websites and YouTube videos, and figure out what your level is and what your weaknesses are, and be very familiar with like the basic parts of speech, like what are nouns, verbs, adjectives. When you're learning new vocabulary, learn these in groups. Things like to create, creation, creative, creativity, creator. So add variety in your speaking through word families, suffixes, prefixes, roots, instead of just arbitrarily replacing a simple, basic conversational word with some kind of abstract word just because you feel like you have to suddenly include some academic words in your speaking. If you can add variety through different word forms, that can be a very effective way to add variety to your speaking without necessarily sounding strange. on there. Okay. Make sure that you're linking sentences and adding variety and complexity to your sentences, maybe compound sentences. And so you need to start like little by little, going from the basics, simple sentences, short, simple ideas, then link them together. And then maybe add clauses like relative clauses, who, that, which. Add some kind of sequencing or compare, contrast, or cause and effect kind of phrases that could show how, what is the objective of that, or why, or how did this influence something else, or just those good old phrases will show your logic, and they'll show how you're developing your ideas. Go analyze and understand examples that you see in writing or in speaking from other students, or things you see in newspapers or books. Again, be analytical, be curious about what goes into a complex sentence, what makes writing and speaking effective. Be aware of what those structures are, internalize them, and try to modify those examples with your own content until it gets more and more automatic, and you can start to use those structures automatically. That will help you with your topic development. It'll help you with your language use. And then once those two are in place, we can then kind of move on to your language use, which is your, after your language use, your delivery, sorry, where you are kind of working on your intonation patterns. So one technique I talk about is kind of speaking with your mouth closed. This is kind of a conversation I might have with my wife where we're both brushing our teeth and we try to ask each other some questions like, And so if you can work on those little intonation patterns with your mouth closed, or if you're watching a YouTube video and trying to do a shadow technique, try doing it first with your mouth closed. So you watch a video, maybe like an interview or one of your favorite TV shows, try to mimic what you just heard. So watch like 5 to 10 seconds, hit pause, and try to repeat the same intonation pattern with your mouth closed until you get those and get those little like rising, falling tones so that they sound natural. And then you can start working on the individual pronunciation of specific words and content and function words, which words are the most important ones that you need to bring out in the sentence. But a shadow technique is very effective. A student I just spoke with earlier today, her intonation pattern just suddenly became very natural. I asked her, how did you do that? Like, because we just had a lesson yesterday, I gave her some advice, and today she was actually sounding very natural. I asked her, what did you do? And she said she started listening to, paying attention to a lot of YouTube videos, imitating the sounds she was hearing, especially for the intonation patterns, and trying to imitate that as kind of accurately as possible, with the inflections, rising, falling, stressing, lengthening, some of these important words. And it was very convincing. I was very surprised how quickly she was able to make those subtle changes. But they were not just subtle, they were very dramatic in terms of how to improve the quality of her overall delivery. So using YouTube, using TED Talks, using audio files, using even using TOEFL prep resources themselves, like go into the listening section, look at the transcript of the listening, listen to how the actual people speak on those recordings. So if this is how TOEFL, how ETS is going to give you samples of how they want their they want their voice actors to sound on the recordings, imitate those voice actors. So that's a very good resource to use where you can imitate the sound patterns. So there's a lot of sample audio files you can get from like the listening section, the audio files that go for the integrated speaking questions. Listen to how those people speak and try to imitate how they speak themselves on those listening exercises, and imitate that as much as you can and try to learn from that, because those are great examples that TOEFL, that ETS is showing us and demonstrating us of what they would like people to sound like. They're giving us an example. This is how like a student should sound like, or this is how a professor should sound like. So try to talk like those same people, and ETS will appreciate that. They will notice when you are following those same patterns. So I don't know what the exact expression is, but give them their own dessert. Serve them their own food. Okay. Great. And message. Oh, hi, Carol. Just stopping by and watch the whole video later. And great advice. Thank you. So yeah, I hope this is not just for the language exam. I mean, it is specifically for the TOEFL, but I think a lot of these techniques can also be applied to other languages as well. But yeah, thanks. Thanks for your feedback. Thanks for stopping by. So record yourself reading a dialogue and compare it to the original. Like if it's a TV script, a movie script, and listen and compare and see what it is that you are doing differently and how can you improve it. Also share those audio files with other people, native speakers or study partners, and allow them to give you just very honest feedback and say, okay, please rate my recording the same way that the examiners are going to do. Just like no mercy, just give me the facts. What do I need to work on? Find speaking partners, find language exchange partners, find conversation partners, people you can talk on Skype, on other kind of different platforms. As much as you can, find study partners who also need to work on their speaking, and just get in the habit of speaking as much as you can. Talk to yourself aloud. So sometimes I try doing this. Maybe I'm in the shower and I'm narrating, or I'm getting dressed and I'm narrating, and this forces me to be constantly changing the context where I am, or I'm cooking, or I'm washing the dishes, and I'm saying like, oh, right now I'm washing this plate. And then I realize like maybe I don't know the word for plate, or I'm walking on the street and I'm looking at everything I see and see like, do I know the word for that? Can I make a little short comment about that? It just constantly force yourself to think and speak either in your head or out loud or whispering the language. Just constantly be using the language. Even if you don't have somebody you can talk to who lives nearby, force yourself to be practicing using this language as much as you can until you just kind of, there's no off switch on your English. Read your emails and your text messages and your articles and your books. Read them out loud as you're going through them. If you receive a message from a friend, read it out loud to yourself, or at least read it in your mental voice that you have in your head. So get yourself constantly thinking about speaking and how you can improve your delivery. So one exercise that I recently did with another student for the TOEFL was we took just a very short paragraph from a news article, and we started to show how we could go from the maybe these lines in red are the stressed syllables. These lines in black are some of these connected speech for the end of a word and the beginning of the next one. Some of these crossed out words are some of the letters that are not necessary, like a letter E or the letter H. And then this thought chunking is these groups of words that are all together. And then some of these lines are the intonation kind of rising and then staying up there and kind of falling. So I'll read this text for you, and this could be a good way that you could take short texts, learn to annotate them, write some comments, and you can observe the like the stress patterns, the phrasing, the pausing. But I'll read this. So Brazil's Attorney General has charged President Michel Temer with obstruction of justice and leading a criminal organization. The accusations are the latest in a growing list of allegations and scandals that have dogged Temer since he replaced President Dilma Rousseff, who was impeached and removed from office last year. Temer has repeatedly denied wrongdoing. While widely expected, the charges deepen Brazil's political crisis and represent more fallout from a wide-ranging corruption probe that has ensnared many of the country's elite. And this exercise can continue. And I encourage students to kind of do this kind of analysis, start with maybe the connected speech, like these beginnings and ends of words, then getting into the stressed syllables, finding out where those are, and then grouping the words based maybe on like a grammatical understanding, like, well, okay, what's the subject? What's the action verb? What's the object? Are there any complementary adverbs or details? So with this one, with obstruction of justice and leading a criminal organization. So I get like two parts of a group. It has like two little tiny pieces, and then I have that as one large group. So these kind of analysis, this kind of analysis can help you with your speaking, but you need to be very creative. You need to get very curious about how the language works and how is it that native speakers kind of demonstrate this understanding of when they're reading out loud, and also when they're improvising speech and speaking and improvising with, like, in a conversation or an interview. So you can do this with many little short texts, especially if there's an audio file that you can listen to for a technique for like shadowing. Okay, so putting this all together, basically we have, you want to kind of, actually for the answering these questions, you want to provide like a clear introduction to express your opinion and your thoughts. You want to be using correct grammar, appropriate vocabulary. You want to be speaking coherently. You want to use these natural sounding intonation and rhythm patterns. You want to pronounce your words clearly. You want to vary your speed, and you want to sound confident and relaxed and calm when you're speaking. It's really important that you use like some of these personal examples, very specific examples that can help you expand and develop your ideas in a clear, easy to follow explanation that makes sense and it's logical. So those are the main things you need to kind of put into your answers. And finally, the point of this presentation, get into a few of these examples. So let's say I'll kind of improvise some of these answers for you. And I don't know if I have a timer that I can show you here, but just to give you an idea of how I would brainstorm and answer this very quickly. So if friends from another country were going to spend some time in your country, what city or place would you suggest they visit? Using details and examples, explain why. Okay. If friends from another country were going to spend some time in my country, I would suggest that they visit Teotihuacan. It is a very historical place, not so far from Mexico City. It has wonderful pyramids that are a great place for exercise, and they give an idea of ancient civilizations that existed in Mexico, and they are not as widely known when tourists visit here. So that's why I would recommend my friends visit Teotihuacan. Okay, another question here. If your friend were bored and wanted to start a new hobby, what would you recommend? Okay. Here I'm going to actually brainstorm a little bit. So a new hobby, let's say play the piano. What could be a benefit about learning to play the piano? They could develop their dexterity, so that's the use of their fingers. They could develop an appreciation and an understanding of music. And they could socialize with other musicians. So, okay, I'm going to start speaking now. So if a friend of mine was bored and wanted to start a new hobby, I would highly recommend learning how to play the piano. First of all, the piano is a great exercise for the fingers. It increases dexterity. It increases coordination, hand-eye coordination. It's also a way to develop a better understanding and appreciation of music when listening to songs and understanding how to play them. And it's also, finally, a great way to socialize with other musicians and to make friends who might share the same interest. So those are a few reasons why I would recommend my friend learn how to play the piano. Okay, next, choose a teacher you admire and explain why you admired him or her. Please include specific examples and details in your explanation. So here's a way that I'm going to recycle an idea. And I just talked about a new hobby about learning how to play the piano. So just to keep working with the same content, I'm going to say my piano teacher is somebody I admired. So, and I'll talk about how they developed my appreciation for music and inspired me to want to study music. So those are a few things that I could recycle from a previous answer. So one of the teachers who I admire the most was my university piano teacher. One of the first reasons why I would say I admired this teacher is that he was an excellent piano player, and he inspired me to want to improve my own piano playing techniques. He also helped me get a better appreciation and understanding of how music was written and composed and how I could interpret it and express myself when performing. So those are a few reasons why I deeply admire this teacher. Okay, another type of answer that's coming up kind of frequently on these type 1 questions is this picking from like 3 choices. So this kind of a question could be, which way is the best for students to make new friends? 1, joining a sport team, 2, participating in community activities, or 3, traveling. Okay, and I'll try to think, maybe recycle once again about joining a sport. And I could say that a sport allows me to uh, just one second, sorry. So I could say with a sport activity that I could make new friends in terms of bonding, sharing skills, and learning to improve my skills. So playing on a team could help me with developing my skills. It could give me a group objective, like winning a game or winning a competition. And it could give me an activity that I could do with them. For example, if we were like basketball, I could play with them whenever I want. So those are maybe 2 or 3 things that I could brainstorm with that. Okay, so one of the best ways I think that students should participate in for making new friends is by joining a sport team. First of all, when you participate in a sport team, you learn to work on a skill together, and you can learn from other students about how to improve that. Another reason why participating on a team is that you have a shared interest in activity that you can do with your friends when you're not just participating on the team. For example, you could play basketball with your friends on the weekend and have some way to spend time together where you both enjoy the same activity. So that's one of the reasons why I would recommend joining a sport team. You have another type of question, could be like agree or disagree. And for example, here, your job has more effect on your happiness than your social life does. Okay, so brainstorming this, I could think, well, like, how does my job affect happiness? Maybe I could backtrack this and think, well, how could my job make me not happy, like sad or stressed out or anxious or nervous? And then maybe what would be the opposite of that? If like, how could my job remove stress and anxiety and nervousness? So in effect, increasing my happiness. So, okay. I believe that your job has more effect on your happiness than your social life does. So yes, I agree with that statement for a few reasons. First of all, when the work environment at a job is peaceful and relaxed and calm, and colleagues can get along well with each other, and they are not stressed out with the boss. This does have a positive effect on one's happiness, and it allows people to leave work and feel happy and content with their life. So those are a few reasons why I would agree with this statement. And okay, so basically a few of those examples are this one: if your friend was bored, what would you recommend? That's an advice question. This other one, like if friends were going to visit, spend time in your country, that's also similar of like some advice. It's also you choosing from something and describing it from maybe based on a personal example. This also choose a teacher you admire. That's also like some personal experience. This other one, what's the best way? This is like choosing from 3 choices and then giving some reasons to support that. Another could be like an agree or disagree. They give you a statement, then you kind of have to provide some details and samples there. Okay. Now the other kind of type 2 is usually you make some kind of a preference. Either some students study for classes individually, others study in groups. Which method of studying do you think is better for students and why? So this is kind of A versus B, and that's usually what this kind of preference is, or which do you think is better and why on there. Here's a comment from Nina. So, hi, she's from Spain and want to reach a C1 and have to be prepared for next year. Okay, so yeah, that's a great goal. And I think if you're practicing your English like on a daily basis, that's a really good way to increase your confidence and your ability to speak that language. For the past 6 months, I've been organizing a speaking challenge. It's like a 30-day speaking challenge, and you're welcome to join that. I think that would be able to help you on a daily basis over the course of this next year to increase your speaking level to get like to a level of C1. So I'll leave a link to that speaking challenge if you're interested. We're in the middle of it right now for October, but you can join that in the next one starting in November. I'll leave some details where you can find out more about that. So with these type 2 questions, you have to choose between one or the other. So it's slightly less difficult than the type 1 where you have to pick from like multiple choices. This one is just pick from 2, and then you have to show your logic. So for example, some students study for classes individually, others study in groups. Which method of studying do you think is better for students and why? Personally, I think it's better to study in groups for a few reasons. First of all, when you study in a group with other students, you can ask each other some questions and test each other on your understanding of concepts. And if for perhaps you have some doubts or questions about a certain topic, perhaps another student might be more experienced or have a better understanding of that and can explain it and help you. Also, students can take a part of a chapter or a book and each become an expert in one area and then explain that to the other students. So those are a few reasons why I would highly recommend studying in groups. Some people prefer to travel with other people while others like to travel on their own. Which method of traveling do you prefer and why? Okay, so I normally say I want to travel on my own, but let's say I just humor myself and do the opposite and try to think of a few reasons why I would travel with a group. Okay, with a group, let's say I don't speak the language, so I don't know how to communicate with other people. Let's say it's the first time I'm in a new place, so I don't know what there is to visit or what are the highlights. And yeah, that's basically it. So, okay. Whereas some people prefer traveling on their own and having that flexibility. Personally, I prefer traveling with other people, especially with a tour group, because if I don't speak the local language, it would be very difficult for me to communicate with locals. So if a tour guide can communicate on my behalf with locals and can also select the most important places for me to see and visit, then that saves me time and allows me to just enjoy visiting a new place. So those are a few reasons why I prefer traveling with a tour group. People enjoy taking risks and trying new things. Others are not adventurous. They are cautious and prefer to avoid danger. Which behavior do you think is better? So I will say taking risks and trying new things is better and being adventurous and maybe going outside of one's comfort zone and testing one's abilities and skills and maybe making new contacts, etc. Okay, so I do realize that some people prefer to avoid risk and danger. However, personally, I think taking some risks and trying new things is a great way to be adventurous. One of the first reasons why I enjoy taking risks is that there's a lot to gain from trying new things and learning from new experiences. Whereas if I just stay within my comfort zone, I may be very limited and not realize all there is that life has to offer. So those are a few things, 3 reasons why I would prefer to try new things and take some risks. Is it better to save the money you earn for future expenses or spend it now on things you enjoy? Give reasons to support your choice. Okay. I think it's better to plan for the future. So I'll go back to this like risk question and say, well, what happens if you don't have money tomorrow? So it's important to plan for the future. It's important to have some savings. If you always spend things now, well, you have no future plans. Okay, so personally, I think it's better to save money and spend money in the future and be able to plan for maybe a vacation or to plan for a retirement. So even though there might be an abundance of money right now that can be spent on things that are enjoyable, I think it's better to be preparing for the future and having a kind of a savings so that in case something happens, you have money to spend if, for example, you get sick or you lose your job. You have enough money to cover your future expenses. So those are a few reasons why I think it's better to save money. Okay, so as you can see, this is me improvising at least about like 8 of these like type 1, type 2 questions. They're not perfect. I can improve upon them. If you'd like, feel free, maybe perhaps not in the live chat section, but leave a comment actually below the video with your answers, with your templates, your how would you develop your answers, and leave that below as a comment, and I will be happy to give you feedback on that. There's also a tool that I use called the SpeakPipe voice recorder. I will leave a link to that in the notes to this video. And you feel free to also provide a link to a short recording so I can hear that. So feel free to write down an answer and also provide a audio file. And I will be happy to review that and give you some feedback. So thank you very much for watching and participating in this live kind of TOEFL prep with the strategies, the advice, recommendations that I usually give to lots and lots of students who have taken the exam and have gotten very high results with their speaking. So if you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them in the chat section and also below the video. I'll be happy to reply and give you further advice to help you with your exam preparations. So have a great day, evening, afternoon, and I will be happy to schedule more of these question and answer sessions and to go through strategies for each of these type of questions. Thank you very much, and take care.